Have you ever looked at someone the world deemed broken and seen only potential? A quiet strength, waiting for the right moment to bloom? Before we begin, if stories like this touch your heart, please like the video, subscribe for more, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from. It means a lot to us. The air inside the Willow Creek Animal Shelter on that Tuesday, November 7th, held the particular chill of damp concrete and fading hope. Outside, a relentless Seattle drizzle blurred the world into shades of gray, turning the parking lot into a slick, dark mirror. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed a flat, monotonous tune, bouncing off the rows of stainless steel cages. The smell was familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. Antiseptic kibble, the warm, slightly sour scent of animal fur, and, beneath it all, a faint undercurrent of urine no amount of cleaning could ever quite erase. It was the smell of waiting, of lives suspended. Sarah Miller stood near the intake desk, clutching a cardboard carrier that felt suddenly unbearably light. Just an hour ago, it had held Mr. Whiskers. 17 years of purring warmth, reduced to a final, peaceful sigh in the vet's office. The carrier was empty now. She'd brought it back out of habit, or maybe because returning it felt like the last concrete thing she could do in the face of the yawning emptiness waiting for her at home. Her apartment would be silent now. No welcoming chirp, no soft thud as he jumped off the windowsill, no weight settling onto her feet at night. Just quiet. A quiet that pressed in heavy and suffocating. She should leave. Go home. Face it. But her feet felt rooted to the spot. The shelter manager, Brenda, a woman whose face seemed permanently etched with gentle exhaustion, touched Sarah's arm. "You okay, hon? That was a good, long life he had. Thanks for bringing the carrier back." Her voice was soft, understanding. Too understanding. It threatened the fragile dam holding back Sarah's tears. I think I'll just walk through," Sarah managed, her voice thick. "Clear my head. Before I go." Brenda nodded, her eyes kind. "Take your time. The back room's quiet today." Sarah drifted past the main kennels, the hopeful barks, the insistent meows, the paws reaching through bars. Each sound, each face, felt like a tiny needle pricking her raw grief. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She turned down the quieter corridor towards the isolation and special needs rooms. Less noise here. Fewer volunteers. More complicated cases. The ones that took longer. The ones that sometimes didn't leave. And that's where she saw him. Room 7. The sign simply said, "Odin." Blind. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't crying. He was just sitting. In the exact center of his small enclosure. A tiny, fluffy statue of gray and white fur. Maybe 8 weeks old. His head was tilted slightly, as if listening intently to a sound only he could hear. His eyes, that's what stopped Sarah cold. They were open, a startling, clouded blue, like marbles dipped in milk. Utterly unseeing. Yet, there was an unnerving stillness about him. A profound calm in the face of absolute darkness. As Sarah approached the glass front slowly, silently, he didn't startle. He didn't turn his head. But his ears, delicate little satellite dishes, swiveled minutely, tracking the faint scuff of her shoe on the floor. He knew she was there. He just didn't react. No fear. No curiosity. Just existence. She knelt, bringing her face closer to the glass. He remained motionless. But then, slowly, deliberate, he lifted one small, white-mittened paw. He placed it carefully on the smooth glass, right where her face was. Not a scratch. Not a demand. Just a touch. A blind kitten, reaching out into the void, connecting with the warmth he sensed on the other side. The gesture was so simple, so profound, it stole Sarah's breath. His mama rejected him. Brenda's voice came softly from behind her, making Sarah jump. She hadn't heard her approach. Born blind, littermates pushed him away. He came in malnourished, terrified. We've nursed him back, but... Brenda sighed, the sound heavy with unspoken realities. Nobody looks long at the blind kitten, Sarah. Especially one this quiet. They want the playful ones. The ones who see them. Sarah watched as Odin lowered his paw. He turned his head a fraction, then took 3 cautious, deliberate steps forward. His nose bumped gently against the side of his litter box. He paused, processed, then meticulously stepped around it. No fuss. No cry. Just navigation. He reached the far wall, felt it with his whiskers, then sat down again. Centered. Still. Waiting. He doesn't make a sound, Sarah whispered, her own grief momentarily eclipsed by the sheer, silent resilience of this tiny creature. Never has, Brenda confirmed. Not a peep since the first terrified yowls faded. Eats, uses the box, explores his space meticulously. Just smart, adaptable. But the silence, the eyes, it unnerves people. Makes him seem distant. Unreachable. She placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. He needs a foster desperately. He can't learn to navigate a real home in here. But Brenda shrugged, the gesture encompassing the harsh truth. It's a big ask. Blind kitten. Unknown future. Probably needs a home with no other pets, no stairs, constant vigilance. Sarah stared at Odin. He was sitting perfectly still again, a small, gray ghost in a sterile box. His clouded eyes seemed to look right through her, and yet, somehow, into her. Into the raw, echoing emptiness Mr. Whiskers had left behind. This kitten wasn't demanding affection. He wasn't radiating playful energy. He was just being. Surviving. Enduring his darkness with a dignity that felt ancient. The weight of her own loss pressed down, but beneath it, something else stirred. Not a replacement, never that. But a different kind of ache. A recognition. This tiny creature, navigating a world he couldn't see, relying on senses the seeing world barely understood, resonated with the disorientation of her own grief. She felt untethered, lost in a landscape suddenly unfamiliar. Odin lived that reality every single second. She thought of the empty apartment, the silence, the untouched food bowl, the overwhelming absence. And then she thought of the quiet courage in room 7, the deliberate steps, the centered stillness, the tiny paw reaching out to touch the glass. Sarah took a deep breath, the damp shelter air filling her lungs, carrying the scent of concrete, and something else. A fragile, tentative spark. A decision forming not from logic, but from a deep, bruised place that recognized a kindred spirit in the dark. Brenda, Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady. She didn't take her eyes off Odin. What would he need? For fostering? Just the basics. A beat of silence. Then Brenda's hand squeezed her shoulder, tighter this time. Sarah, are you sure? It's a commitment. He's different. Sarah finally looked up at Brenda. Tears still glistened in her eyes, but beneath them, a flicker of something new. Something fragile, but determined. Different isn't broken, she said softly, repeating the phrase she desperately needed to believe about herself these past weeks. She looked back at the small gray shape in the cage, He just needs someone to see him. Really see him. Odin, as if sensing the shift, the sudden intensity of focus, turned his head fractionally towards her voice. His clouded blue eyes seemed to hold the faintest reflection of the fluorescent light. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the first tentative glimmer of a connection, reaching across the glass, across the silence, across the vast, lonely gulf between loss and the terrifying, beautiful possibility of beginning again. Sarah's heart, a heavy stone moments before, gave a single, quiet thud. Not joy, not yet, but a shift. A tiny, seismic movement in the landscape of her grief. The story of Odin and Sarah had just turned its first unseen page. The apartment wasn't silent anymore. It hummed, with a different kind of quiet. The deep, echoing absence left by Mr. Whiskers was still there, a tangible presence Sarah felt every time she walked through the door. But now, layered beneath it, was the sound of careful exploration. The soft pat-pat-pat of tiny, cautious paws, testing the cool laminate of the kitchen floor, then the sudden shift to the worn rug in the living room. The faint sniff-sniff-sniff, whiskers twitching against baseboards, furniture legs, door frames. Odin was mapping his world, inch by meticulous inch. Sarah watched him from the doorway, her breath held, coffee forgotten in her hand. He moved with a deliberate, almost meditative slowness. Head tilted, ears constantly swiveling, nose working over to. He bumped gently into the leg of the dining table. Felt the solid wood with his cheek and whiskers. Took a half step back, processed, then carefully skirted around it. No startled jump. No frustrated mew. Just recalibration. Like a tiny, furry cartographer charting unknown territory entirely by touch, sound, and smell. Sarah had spent the first 3 days transforming her small apartment into a fortress of safety. Electrical cords bundled and hidden. Sharp corners padded with foam. Precious knickknacks lifted to higher shelves. Every potential hazard imagined and neutralized. She'd created clear pathways, kept furniture placement rigidly consistent. His food and water bowls, placed on a textured mat near the kitchen sink, a constant landmark. His litter box, tucked into the corner of the small bathroom, the scent a reliable beacon. A soft nest of blankets. Mr. Whisker's old heated bed, thoroughly cleaned, placed beneath the living room window, where the afternoon sun pooled like warm honey. She'd braced herself for chaos, for the frantic cries of a scared, blind kitten lost in a vast, terrifying space. But Odin was different. He wasn't frantic. He was methodical, intensely focused. His silence wasn't emptiness. Sarah was starting to realize. It was profound concentration. The only sound he seemed capable of making was a tiny, breathy, almost like a sigh, when he was deeply content. Like when Sarah gently scooped him up after one of his mapping expeditions, his tiny body going instantly still, then melting into a warm, purring weight against her chest. He'd press his face into the curve of her neck, his cold nose a tiny point of sensation, his clouded eyes half closed. She'd feel the rumble start deep within him, a vibration more felt than heard, a low, steady thrum against her collarbone. It wasn't the loud, demanding purr Mr. Whiskers had possessed. It was quieter, deeper, more elemental. A sound of pure, wordless trust. That trust was hard-won and fragile. Sarah moved slowly, spoke softly, narrating her actions even when he seemed asleep. Just going to the kitchen, filling your water bowl. She learned to announce her approach, a gentle tap on the floor near him, before reaching out. Sudden movements, unexpected touches, sent him into a brief, frozen panic. His ears would flatten, his body would tense, a silent statue until the perceived threat passed. Bonding happened in stolen moments, in the quiet spaces between Sarah's own waves of grief. One evening, drained after a day of forcing herself through work emails, she sank onto the sofa, a worn photo album open on her lap. Pictures of Mr. Whiskers, kittenhood to dignified elder statesman. The familiar ache, sharp and fresh, tightened her throat. Tears blurred the image of him batting at a feather toy, his eyes bright with mischief. She let them fall, silent tracks down her cheeks, the album heavy on her knees. She hadn't noticed Odin nearby. He'd been exploring the texture of the woven rug beneath the coffee table. But the shift in her stillness, the subtle catch in her breath, perhaps the faint salt scent of her tears, drew him. Sarah sensed movement at her feet. She looked down, wiping her eyes. Odin was sitting at the very edge of the rug, facing the sofa, facing her. His head was tilted, his unseeing eyes seemed fixed, not on her face, but on the space where her sadness hung heavy in the air. He wasn't purring. He wasn't trying to climb up. He just sat, utterly still, utterly present, as if holding vigil for a sorrow he couldn't see, but could somehow feel. Sarah held her breath. The raw vulnerability of being witnessed in her grief by this small, silent creature was unexpectedly intense. She didn't reach for him. She just let herself be seen. Minutes stretched. The only sounds were the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant sigh of traffic outside, and Sarah's own quiet sniffles. Odin remained motionless, a small, gray sentinel in the dim light. Then, slowly, deliberately he stood. He took 2 precise steps forward, his paws finding the transition from rug to laminate. He paused, oriented himself towards the sofa leg. With painstaking care, he navigated around it, his whiskers brushing the fabric. He emerged near her feet. Sarah watched, mesmerized. He lifted his head, sniffing the air towards her knees, where the album lay. He took one more step, then another, until his nose gently bumped the edge of the photo album. He froze, then carefully, cautiously extended one white mittened paw. Not towards the album, but upwards, towards Sarah's hand, resting limply beside it. His tiny paw, so soft, barely made contact. Just the faintest brush of fur and pads against her knuckles. A whisper of touch. A blind kitten, reaching out, not to a wall of glass this time, but to skin, to warmth, to the source of the sadness he sensed. The touch, so tentative, so achingly deliberate, shattered something inside Sarah. It wasn't a demand for attention. It wasn't playfulness. It felt like recognition, a silent acknowledgement of her pain. A tiny bridge offered across the dark. A sob escaped her, raw and unexpected. She didn't pull her hand away. Odin didn't flinch. He kept his paw there, a minuscule point of connection, his clouded eyes seeming to gaze into the middle distance, yet utterly focused on her. The purr started then, that deep, quiet thrum vibrating up from his chest, through his paw, into her skin. A steady, grounding pulse in the midst of her storm. Sarah slowly, ever so slowly, turned her hand palm up beneath his tiny paw. He didn't resist. He let his paw rest fully on her skin. The warmth, the softness, the profound there-ness of him was an anchor. She lowered her head, her tears falling onto the photo album, blurring Mr. Whiskers' playful image. But this time, the ache wasn't entirely solitary. This small, silent creature, navigating his own profound darkness, was sitting with her in hers. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't make a sound. He just was present, connected by the faintest brush of a paw. Later that night, long after Odin had navigated his way back to his heated bed beneath the window, Sarah lay awake. The silence of the apartment felt different. Still vast, still echoing with loss, but no longer entirely empty. She replayed that moment, the weightless touch, the deep, resonant purr vibrating against her skin. She thought of Odin's daily mapping, his quiet resilience, his uncanny stillness. He wasn't replacing Mr. Whiskers. He couldn't. But he was teaching her something about navigating the dark, about finding your way by senses you didn't know you had, about the profound language of silent presence. She drifted off, not to the crushing silence, but to the memory of a tiny, warm paw resting on her hand, a silent promise whispered across the void. The apartment held its breath, the darkness less absolute, the quiet now cradling the fragile, growing trust between a woman adrift in grief and a blind kitten learning the contours of his first real home. The map wasn't finished, for either of them, but they were starting to chart it, together, one careful, silent step at a time. The rhythm of their shared existence settled, like dust motes dancing in a sunbeam. Predictable, punctuated by moments of profound, silent connection. Sarah learned the language of Odin's stillness. The slight tilt of his head meant intense listening, perhaps a bird chirping on the fire escape outside. The delicate twitch of his whiskers against her ankle as she stood at the kitchen counter, not a demand, just a tactile check-in. You're here. The deep, resonant purr that vibrated through her chest when she held him, a sound that seemed to emanate from his very core, a primal song of safety. He mapped the apartment with increasing confidence. His routes became efficient, almost graceful. From the heated bed beneath the window, a straight line to the water bowl, a precise right-angle turn to avoid the table leg, a soft hop onto the rug, a direct path to the sofa where Sarah often sat in the evenings. He rarely bumped into things anymore. His world, defined by scent trails, temperature gradients, the subtle echoes of sound bouncing off walls, felt solid, known. Sarah's own internal landscape was shifting, slowly. The sharp, jagged edges of grief for Mr. Whiskers were softening, worn down by the quiet constancy of Odin's presence. She still cried sometimes, looking at his collar tucked in a drawer, or finding a stray white hair caught in the weave of the sofa. But the tears felt less like drowning and more like rain, washing over her, then clearing. Odin would often appear during these moments, not with a paw on her hand, but simply sitting nearby, a warm, silent anchor in the emotional tide. His acceptance, his lack of expectation, was a balm. Then, late one Tuesday night, the rhythm fractured. Sarah was reading in bed, the soft yellow glow of her lamp the only light. Odin was curled in his designated spot at the foot, a small, warm lump beneath the duvet, deeply asleep. The city outside was hushed, just the distant, rhythmic sigh of rain against the window pane. A sound Sarah usually found soothing. Suddenly, Odin sat bolt upright. Not the languid stretch of waking, but a sharp, electric jolt. His head snapped to the side, not towards Sarah, but towards the wall. The wall shared with apartment 3B. Mrs. Gable's apartment. An elderly woman Sarah exchanged polite nods with in the hallway, but knew little about. Mrs. Gable kept to herself, and seemed to have no pets. Odin's ears were rigid, swiveling like radar dishes, straining towards the wall. His clouded eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on nothing Sarah could perceive. His entire body was tense, coiled. A low sound, unlike anything Sarah had ever heard from him, rumbled in his chest. Not a purr, not a growl, more like a vibration of pure, focused intensity, a hum of deep concern. "Odin," Sarah whispered, setting her book down. "What is it, buddy?" He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her. His entire being was directed at the wall. His nose twitched violently, sniffing the air. Sarah sniffed too. Nothing unusual, just the familiar scent of her apartment, old books, laundry detergent, the faint, comforting musk of cat. Then, it came again. Faint. So faint Sarah wasn't sure she wasn't imagining it at first. A sound filtering through the wall. Not loud, not distinct, but wrong. A thin, high-pitched, desperate sound. Like the mewl of a kitten, but choked, weak, punctuated by frantic scrabbling. It lasted only a few seconds, then silence. Odin reacted instantly. He launched himself off the bed, landing silently on the carpet. He didn't hesitate. He moved with purpose, faster than Sarah had ever seen him move, straight to the wall. He pressed his entire body against it, his ear flat to the plaster. He let out that intense hum again, louder this time. Almost a silent cry. Sarah scrambled out of bed, heart suddenly pounding. "Odin? What's wrong?" She knelt beside him, placing a hand on his back. He flinched slightly at the unexpected touch, but didn't pull away. His focus remained laser-locked on the wall. His small body vibrated with tension. Silence from next door. Heavy. Sarah pressed her own ear to the cool plaster. Nothing. Just the hum of the building, the distant rain. Had she imagined it? Had Odin imagined it? But the kitten's reaction was undeniable. Primal. Alarmed. Maybe it was the pipes? Sarah murmured, more to herself than to Odin. Or the wind. Odin ignored her. He began to pace. Not his usual methodical exploration, but a tight, agitated circuit along the base of the wall. Back and forth, his tail held low and stiff. He'd stop, press his ear and cheek against the plaster, listen, then resume pacing. The low hum never ceased. It was unnerving. This wasn't the calm, centered kitten she knew. This was distress, radiating off him in silent waves. The sound didn't return that night, but Odin didn't settle. He refused to return to the bed. He stationed himself by the shared wall, a tiny, rigid sentinel, ears perpetually pricked. Sarah eventually drifted into a fitful sleep, lulled by the rain and the unsettling image of her blind cat, guarding against an unseen threat from next door. The next day, Odin was different. Distracted, jumpy. His careful mapping routes were abandoned. He spent long stretches sitting by the living room wall, the one adjoining Mrs. Gable's apartment, utterly still, listening. His meals went half-eaten. When Sarah picked him up, his purr was hesitant, shallow, his attention constantly drifting back towards the wall. The profound peace he usually carried was fractured. Sarah tried to rationalize it. Maybe Mrs. Gable had the TV on loud? Maybe she'd adopted a cat? But the sound, that weak, desperate mewl, haunted her. And Odin's reaction, it felt too specific, too visceral. He wasn't reacting to noise pollution. He was reacting to distress, curiosity, laced with a growing sense of unease, gnawed at Sarah. She found herself listening intently whenever she passed the wall, straining to hear past the normal apartment sounds, the clatter of dishes, the muffled TV, Mrs. Gable's occasional cough. But she heard nothing unusual, just silence. An almost oppressive silence from 3B. She saw Mrs. Gable briefly in the hallway 2 days later. The older woman looked diminished, paler than usual, her movements slower, more deliberate. She carried a small paper bag from the pharmacy. Sarah offered a hesitant smile. "Afternoon, Mrs. Gable. Everything okay?" The older woman's eyes, usually sharp behind her glasses, seemed clouded, distant. "Fine, dear. Just fine." Her voice was thin, papery. She didn't meet Sarah's gaze. She fumbled with her keys, dropped them. Sarah bent to pick them up. As she handed them back, she caught a faint whiff from the bag. Not medicine, something else. Sharp, slightly sour. Like antiseptic and something vaguely animal. "Can I help you with anything?" Sarah asked, the question feeling inadequate. No. Quite all right." Mrs. Gable managed a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She slipped quickly into her apartment, closing the door firmly behind her. The lock clicked with finality. Sarah stood in the hallway, the faint, unsettling scent lingering in her nostrils. Odin's intense focus, the weak, choked sound, Mrs. Gable's pallor, the antiseptic smell. Pieces of a puzzle she couldn't see, but Odin, somehow, did. He sensed it. He knew something was wrong next door. That evening, the tension in her own apartment thickened. Odin resumed his vigil by the wall, pacing, listening. Sarah tried to distract him, offering his favorite feathered toy, a dab of tuna. He ignored it all. His world had narrowed to that shared plaster barrier and the silent distress emanating from beyond it. He seemed agitated, almost helpless. He'd press against the wall, then turn to Sarah, his clouded eyes seeming to search her face, as if willing her to understand, to act. Sarah felt a knot of anxiety tightening in her own chest. What was happening over there? Was Mrs. Gable ill? Was there an animal? Neglected? Odin's silent insistence was becoming impossible to ignore. His usual profound calm had been replaced by a palpable urgency, a silent scream only he could hear. The conflict was internal, but fierce. Grief had taught Sarah the value of boundaries, of self-protection. Mr. Whisker's illness and passing had drained her, emotionally, physically. The thought of inserting herself into a neighbor's private troubles, the potential for awkwardness, confrontation, more pain, was daunting. Exhausting. "Stay in your safe bubble," a voice whispered. "Focus on Odin. On healing." But another voice, quiet, yet insistent, echoed Odin's silent plea. It was the voice that had recognized potential in a blind kitten deemed unadoptable. The voice that understood darkness and the desperate need for someone to simply see. She looked at Odin. He'd stopped pacing. He was sitting directly in front of the wall, his back unnaturally straight, his ears rigidly forward. He let out a single, tough, breathy sound. Not a pft of contentment. It was different. Lower. Almost a sigh of profound sorrow. A sound Sarah had never heard before. It wasn't directed at her. It was directed through the wall. A sound of pure, helpless empathy. That sigh, filled with a sorrow he couldn't possibly comprehend intellectually, but felt with every fiber of his being, was the turning point. The quiet tension in the room snapped, replaced by a surge of resolve. Sarah couldn't decipher the mystery through the wall. Odin could sense the distress, but he couldn't open the door. He needed her eyes, her voice, her hands. The safety of her bubble felt suddenly suffocating, selfish. Odin, this small creature navigating perpetual darkness, was trying to guide her towards someone else's suffering. His silence wasn't indifference. It was a profound awareness, a depth of feeling she was only beginning to grasp. Sarah took a deep, shaky breath. The weight of her own grief felt momentarily lighter, replaced by the heavier weight of responsibility and a dawning fear of what she might find next door. She looked at the small, gray sentinel by the wall, his unseeing eyes fixed on the unseen source of pain. "Okay, buddy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't name. "I see you." She wasn't just talking to Odin. It was a promise to whatever silent anguish lay beyond the wall. The fragile piece of their shared existence was over. The map had changed. Odin had charted a course, not for himself, but for her. Towards a door that needed opening. Towards a truth hidden in the silence of apartment 3B. The quiet rhythm was broken, replaced by the pounding of her own heart and the silent, insistent pull of a blind kitten's profound empathy. The story was no longer just about survival or even healing. It was about listening, truly listening, to the silent cries only the heart can hear. The silence in Sarah's apartment felt charged, electric. Odin remained motionless by the shared wall, a small, gray statue radiating tension. His earlier sigh, that sound of helpless sorrow, echoed in Sarah's bones. It wasn't just a reaction. It was a plea. A silent command from a creature who saw the world through senses deeper than sight. Do something. The knot of anxiety in Sarah's chest tightened, threatening to choke her. Every instinct screamed to stay put. To preserve the fragile piece she'd carved out with Odin. To avoid the potential mess. The embarrassment, the pain of intruding on Mrs. Gable's privacy. Grief had made her crave walls, safety. But Odin, this blind kitten navigating darkness with such quiet courage, was dismantling those walls brick by silent brick. His stillness wasn't passive. It was a demand for action. Taking a shuddering breath, Sarah forced her feet to move. Away from the sanctuary of her living room, towards her own apartment door. The familiar brass knob felt cold, alien under her trembling hand. She paused, listening. From behind her, she sensed rather than heard Odin shift. He wasn't following her towards her own door. He remained fixed, facing his door, the invisible barrier to the source of the distress. His entire posture was an arrow pointing the way. "Okay," she whispered again, more to steel herself than to him. "Okay." Stepping into the dim hallway felt like stepping onto a stage. The worn carpet, the faint smell of cabbage from another floor, the distant hum of the elevator, everything seemed amplified. Apartment 3B's door loomed, painted a dull, institutional green. The brass number gleamed dully in the overhead light. Sarah raised her hand, knuckles hovering inches from the wood. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the oppressive silence. What if Mrs. Gable is just ill? What if she tells me to mind my own business? What if there's nothing wrong? What if Odin was wrong? The doubts swirled, thick and suffocating. But then she remembered the sound. That weak, choked mule. Odin's rigid focus. The antiseptic smell on the bag. The profound sorrow in his sigh. He wasn't wrong. His world was built on perceiving the unseen. She knocked. 3 sharp raps that sounded unnervingly loud in the quiet corridor. Nothing. Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Sarah knocked again, harder this time. "Mrs. Gable? It's Sarah, from next door? Just checking if everything's all right." Her voice sounded thin, unconvincing even to her own ears. More silence. Then, faintly, the sound of shuffling feet. Slow, dragging. the metallic scrape of multiple locks being undone. The door creaked open, just a few inches. A sliver of Mrs. Gable's face appeared, her eyes wide, bloodshot, and filled with a panic that made Sarah's breath catch. The sharp, sour smell Sarah had noticed before intensified, rolling out from the apartment in a wave. Antiseptic, yes, but beneath it, something else. Something sickly sweet, cloying. Like infection. And, unmistakably, the faint, acrid tang of urine. Sarah? Mrs. Gable's voice was a rasp. Thin, brittle. What is it? She tried to pull the door tighter, but her movements were weak, uncoordinated. Mrs. Gable. Sarah's mind raced. The sight of the woman, the smell, confirmed her deepest fears. I thought I heard something. Earlier? Like a kitten crying? Do you have a pet in there? She kept her voice gentle, non-accusatory. Mrs. Gable's eyes darted wildly, not meeting Sarah's gaze. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the door edge. No pet. You must be mistaken. Just the radio. The pipes. Her denial was too quick, too sharp. A tremor ran through her frail body. Mrs. Gable. Sarah softened her voice further, leaning slightly closer. The smell was overwhelming now. Please, I'm not angry. I want to help. If there's an animal in there, if it's hurt. The older woman's face crumpled. The brittle denial shattered, replaced by a wave of pure, raw terror and something else, deep, profound shame. Her legs seemed to buckle. She swayed, grabbing the doorframe for support. A choked sob escaped her. I didn't mean. I couldn't, she's so little. The words dissolved into ragged gasps. The door swung wider, revealing the dim chaos beyond. Sarah didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, catching Mrs. Gable as her knees gave way. The woman was feather-light, trembling violently. Sarah guided her gently, stumbling, towards a threadbare armchair visible just inside the door. The apartment was stifling, overheated, cluttered with stacks of yellowed newspapers, unwashed dishes piled in the sink, dust thick on every surface. And the smell was a physical presence. Antiseptic, infection, waste, and fear. Where? Sarah asked urgently, lowering Mrs. Gable into the chair. The older woman just shook her head, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks, pointing a trembling finger towards a closed door down a short hallway. A linen closet? A bathroom? Sarah moved, driven by a surge of adrenaline that overrode her own fear. She pushed open the door Mrs. Gable had indicated. It was a small bathroom. The smell here was concentrated, nauseating. The light was off. Sarah fumbled for the switch. Harsh fluorescent light flickered on, illuminating a scene that made her stomach lurch. Crumpled towels littered the floor. An open bottle of hydrogen peroxide lay on its side near the sink, its contents staining the linoleum. And in the corner, half hidden behind the toilet, was a small, open cardboard box. Inside, barely visible on a stained towel, was a tiny ball of matted orange fur. Sarah rushed forward, dropping to her knees. The kitten, impossibly small, maybe 5 weeks old, lay on its side, breathing in rapid, shallow gasps. Its eyes were crusted shut. Its ribs protruded sharply beneath filthy, tangled fur. One hind leg, bent at an unnatural angle, was swollen grotesquely, the fur around it dark with dried blood and pus. The source of the sickly sweet smell. Infection. Advance. The kitten didn't mewl now. It was beyond that. Its tiny body shuddered with each labored breath. It was dying. "Oh God," Sarah breathed, the horror of it stealing her voice. Instinct took over. She reached into the box, her hands trembling, terrified of hurting the tiny creature further. As her fingers brushed the matted fur, the kitten flinched, a weak, almost silent tremor. Its mouth opened in a soundless cry. She needed something, the carrier, a blanket. She scrambled back into the living room, her eyes scanning the cluttered space. Mrs. Gable sat huddled in the armchair, sobbing silently, lost in her own world of guilt and despair. "A carrier? A box? Anything?" Sarah asked desperately. Mrs. Gable just shook her head, mute with shame. Sarah spotted a plastic laundry basket near the kitchen. Empty. It would have to do. She grabbed it, yanking a relatively clean-looking tea towel from a pile on the counter. Rushing back to the bathroom, she gently, oh so gently, scooped the tiny, burning hot body onto the towel. The kitten felt like a fragile bird, all bones and fever. She nestled it into the basket, cushioning it with the towel. Its breathing was terrifyingly shallow. She had to get it to a vet. She lifted the basket, turning to rush out. As she passed the living room, her gaze fell on her own apartment door. She'd left it slightly ajar. And there, sitting perfectly still just inside her threshold, was Odin. He wasn't looking at her. His clouded blue eyes were fixed, unerringly, on the laundry basket in her arms, on the tiny, dying creature within it. He didn't move, didn't make a sound, but his entire being radiated an intense, focused awareness. He knew. "Stay, Odin," Sarah choked out, her voice thick with tears and urgency. "I'll be back." She couldn't manage the kitten and Odin. Not now. She rushed past him. Down the hall, the basket clutched to her chest. The tiny kitten's breath hitched, a horrible wet sound. Sarah ran. Down the stairs, bursting out into the cool, damp night air. She fumbled with her car keys, her hands slick with sweat and tears. She placed the basket on the passenger seat, the kitten a still, silent mound on the towel. "Hold on," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Just hold on, little one." She started the car, tires screeching as she pulled away from the curb, heading towards the 24-hour emergency vet across town. The city lights blurred past the rain-streaked windshield. Her mind raced. The vet bills, the prognosis. Mrs. Gable alone and shattered in her apartment. And Odin, waiting silently in the doorway. His profound stillness, his unerring focus on the basket. At the emergency clinic, everything became a frantic blur of bright lights, antiseptic smells that couldn't mask the kitten's infection, and urgent voices. Sarah handed over the tiny orange form, explaining the situation in disjointed sentences. The vet tech's face was grim as she whisked the kitten away. Sarah collapsed into a hard plastic chair in the waiting room, the adrenaline draining away, leaving her shaking, hollow. The smell of the kitten, of infection and despair, seemed embedded in her clothes, her skin. She waited. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The fluorescent lights hummed. The fear was a physical weight, crushing her chest. Had she been too late? That tiny, broken body, the unnatural angle of the leg, the advanced infection. It felt hopeless. The vet emerged eventually, her expression carefully neutral. Sarah stood up, bracing herself. "She's critical," the vet said, her voice low, professional. "Severe infection from an untreated fracture, probably caught in something or stepped on. Malnourished. Dehydrated. We've started antibiotics, fluids, pain management. Stabilized her for now." The leg. The vet sighed. "We need to amputate. It's necrotic. There's no saving it. She's too weak for surgery immediately, but if she makes it through the night, we'll operate tomorrow." Sarah nodded numbly. Amputation. A three-legged kitten. If she survived. The enormity of it, the suffering, crashed over her. She thought of Mrs. Gable's terrified eyes, her whispered, "She's so little." The shame. The overwhelming inability to cope. "She has a chance?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. "A fighting chance," the vet confirmed. "She's a scrap. Fierce little heartbeat under all that mess. We'll call you with updates." She paused, looking at Sarah. "You did the right thing, bringing her in. However you found her." Sarah paid the deposit, a sum that made her head spin, and walked back out into the rain. The drive home was a blur. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion and a profound sadness that felt bottomless. She climbed the stairs to her apartment building, her legs leaden. The hallway was silent. She paused outside Mrs. Gable's door. No sound came from within. Just emptiness. Sarah couldn't face it. Not yet. She turned to her own door, fumbling with the key. She pushed it open. The familiar scent of her apartment was over her, a small comfort. She stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her, leaning back against it for support. She closed her eyes, the image of the tiny orange kitten, the feel of its feverish body, the vet's words replaying on a loop. She felt it, a soft pressure against her ankle. Warm, familiar. She opened her eyes, looked down. Odin was there. He hadn't moved to his bed. He hadn't retreated to the window. He was sitting right at her feet, where she'd left him, but now his head was tilted up, his clouded blue eyes seeming to gaze directly into hers. He lifted one white-mittened paw and placed it gently, deliberately, on her shin. Not a question. A statement. A grounding touch. He held it there, then slowly, he lowered his head and rubbed his cheek, his temple, against her leg. A slow, deliberate scent marking. Claiming her. Anchoring her. His deep, resonant purr started, a low, steady thrum that vibrated up through her bones, a tangible wave of warmth, of presence, in the cold aftermath of horror. Sarah stared down at him. This small, blind creature who had sensed suffering through a wall. Who had stood sentinel. Who had sighed with shared sorrow. Who had waited, patient, knowing she would return, bearing the weight of that suffering. He couldn't see the tears streaming down her face. He couldn't see the exhaustion, the fear for the orange scrap fighting for life miles away. But he knew. He felt it. And he was here. Not with solutions. Not with platitudes. Just with the profound, silent certainty of his presence. His paw on her leg. His purr resonating in the quiet space. The dam broke. Sarah slid down the door, landing hard on the floor. She pulled Odin into her lap, burying her face in his soft, gray fur. She didn't just cry. She sobbed. Great, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Sobs for the tiny kitten, fighting alone under harsh lights. Sobs for Mrs. Gable, lost and ashamed in her cluttered apartment. Sobs for Mr. Whiskers, whose absence still ached. Sobs for the sheer, overwhelming cruelty and fragility of life. Odin didn't struggle. He didn't try to escape the storm of her grief. He settled into her lap, his body a warm, purring weight. He pressed his head against her chest, right over her pounding heart. His purr deepened, intensified, becoming a physical vibration that seemed to seep into her, a counter-rhythm to her sobs. A steady, grounding pulse in the chaos. He didn't lick her tears. He didn't meow. He simply existed, held her, purred, his unseen eyes closed, not in sleep, but in deep, focused contentment, as if holding her, anchoring her through this tempest, was the most natural, the most important thing in his world. In that moment, on the floor by the door, with the rain whispering against the window and the scent of another creature's suffering clinging to her clothes, Sarah understood. Odin's blindness wasn't a lack. It was a different kind of sight. He saw the world in vibrations, in scent trails, in the subtle shifts of energy and emotion. He saw the pain next door. He saw her pain. And he offered the only thing he truly had to give, the unwavering certainty of his presence. His purr wasn't just comfort. It was a language, a promise whispered against her skin. You are not alone. I'm here. We are here. The storm of tears eventually subsided, leaving her hollowed out, but strangely clean. Spent. She held Odin close, his purr a steady hum against her quieting heartbeat. The fear for the orange kitten was still there. The worry for Mrs. Gable. The ache of her own losses. But the crushing weight, the sense of drowning isolation, had shifted. Odin's small, warm body, his profound, silent understanding, was a lifeline she hadn't known she needed. He hadn't just sensed the suffering next door. He had guided her into it, and now he was guiding her through the aftermath. Not with vision, but with a depth of perception that left her awestruck. The blind kitten, in the darkest hour, had become the guide. The emotional climax wasn't just the discovery or the vet visit. It was the sit on the floor, in the quiet aftermath, held by a purring beacon in the dark. The map had been redrawn, not just for Sarah, but for Odin too. His purpose, silent, profound, had just been revealed. The world didn't magically right itself. The harsh fluorescent glow of the emergency vet's waiting room, the smell of antiseptic and despair, the weight of the tiny, broken life Sarah had carried out of Mrs. Gable's bathroom, it all clung to her like a second skin. Sleep, when it finally came after the storm of tears with Odin purring against her heart, was thin, fractured by dreams of searching through endless, cluttered darkness for a mewling sound that faded just as she got close. The phone call came mid-morning. Sarah was sitting at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cooling mug of coffee she couldn't bring herself to drink. Odin sat nearby, not by the wall, but facing her. His stillness felt different now. Less like vigilant waiting, more like deep, patient presence. As if he was holding space for the news, whatever it would be. She made it through the night. The vet's voice was weary but held a thread of cautious relief. Her vitals are stabilizing. She's a fighter, this one. We're prepping her for surgery now. The leg has to come off. It's the only way. Sarah closed her eyes. Relief, sharp and dizzying, warred with the brutal image of amputation. A three-legged kitten, barely weaned. Blind? She hadn't even thought to ask. Her eyes? She managed. Severe infection there too. Conjunctivitis. We're treating it aggressively. It's too early to know if there's permanent damage, but she's responding to the medication. She's not blind. The vet paused. The surgery is risky, but necessary. We'll call when she's out. Sarah hung up. The silence in the apartment pressed in. She looked at Odin. He tilted his head, his clouded blue eyes seeming to absorb the tension radiating from her. He let out a soft, breathy, not contentment, but acknowledgement. He knew the orange scrap was still fighting. The next hours were an agony of waiting. Sarah tried to distract herself. She cleaned, mechanically wiping down surfaces already spotless. She attempted to eat, but the toast tasted like ash. Odin followed her, a silent, gray shadow. His usual meticulous mapping was suspended. He seemed attuned solely to her restless pacing, the way her breath hitched whenever the phone remained silent. He'd brush against her ankle or sit directly in her path, forcing her to pause, to take a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Finally, the phone rang. "She's out of surgery. Stable. The amputation went as well as it could. She's resting. Still critical, but she pulled through." The vet's voice held more warmth now. "She's got spirit, this little tripod. We'll keep her heavily sedated and on 4 fluids for now. You can visit later this afternoon, briefly." Tripod. The word landed with a strange finality. A new reality. Sarah thanked the vet, her voice thick with unshed tears, this time of overwhelming relief mixed with profound sorrow for the tiny creature's suffering. She sank onto the sofa. Odin immediately jumped up, not onto his usual spot, but directly onto her lap. He circled once, then settled, pressing his warm weight against her stomach. His deep purr started, a tangible vibration against her skin, a grounding counterpoint to the emotional whiplash. Later that afternoon, Sarah walked into the sterile quiet of the veterinary ICU. The orange kitten lay in a clear plastic incubator, swaddled in soft blankets, dwarfed by monitoring wires and the 4-line taped to her tiny foreleg. Where her hind leg should have been was a neat bandage, stark white against her matted, but cleaner, orange fur. Her eyes, crusted with ointment, were closed. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She looked impossibly fragile, yet there was a fierce resilience in the way her tiny chest rose and fell. Sarah stood there, tears silently tracking down her cheeks. This tiny survivor, pulled from a box behind a toilet, fighting for every breath. She placed a gentle finger against the incubator glass. "Hey there, little fighter," she whispered. "You made it." Visiting hours were short. Sarah left feeling a strange mix of awe and crushing responsibility. This kitten, this tripod, needed a home. A safe one. A patient one. Who would take her? The thought felt overwhelming on top of everything else. She drove home, the weight of decisions settling heavy on her shoulders. Stepping into her apartment, the familiar scent was a balm. Odin was waiting just inside the door, as he had been the night before. He sniffed the air intensely as she entered, his nose twitching, processing the lingering scents of the clinic, the antiseptic, and faintly, the orange kitten. He let out another soft pft, then rubbed his cheek deliberately against her shin. A welcome home. A scent reclamation. The next few days became a rhythm of anxious phone calls, brief vet visits, and the quiet, watchful presence of Odin. The orange kitten, whom the vet staff had started calling Sunny for her fiery color and emerging spirit, slowly improved. Her infection receded. She opened her eyes, bright, intelligent green, thankfully clear of the crusting. She started taking formula from a syringe, tiny, demanding sucks that were the first sounds Sarah heard from her beyond the weak gasps. She was feisty, scared, but fiercely determined to live. Sarah visited daily. She'd sit by the incubator, talking softly, letting Sunny get used to her voice, her scent. One afternoon, during a visit, she saw a familiar, hesitant figure standing near the reception desk. Mrs. Gable. She looked even smaller, swallowed by an oversized coat. Her face was pale, etched with deep lines of worry and shame. She clutched a small, worn purse tightly. Sarah's first instinct was anger. A hot flash of it. How could she leave a kitten to suffer like that? But then she remembered the raw terror in the woman's eyes, the profound helplessness. She took a deep breath and walked over. Mrs. Gable? The older woman flinched, then turned. Seeing Sarah, her eyes filled instantly with tears. Sarah? I had to come. I had to know, is she? She's alive, Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. She's recovering. She lost the leg. Mrs. Gable covered her mouth with a trembling hand. A sob escaped. Oh, the poor little thing. I found her. Weeks ago. Behind the dumpsters. Freezing. Someone must have dumped her. I meant to take her to a shelter, but her voice broke. I got sick. Couldn't get out of bed for days. I left her food, water. She shook her head, tears streaming freely now. Then she fell off the counter while I was too weak to stop her. I heard the cry, that awful sound, but I couldn't. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. The leg, it looked so bad. I tried cleaning it, but she dissolved into helpless sobs. I was so ashamed, so scared. I just hid her away, hoping it would get better on its own. I know it was monstrous. The raw confession, the sheer depth of her fear and shame diffused Sarah's anger. It wasn't malice. It was overwhelming, paralyzing helplessness. A different kind of darkness. She's getting the care she needs now, Sarah said softly. That's what matters. Mrs. Gable looked up, her eyes desperate. Can I see her? Just for a moment? I won't disturb her. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She led the trembling woman back to the ICU. Mrs. Gable approached the incubator slowly, her breath catching at the sight of the tiny, bandaged kitten. She pressed a hand against the glass. "Oh, little one," she whispered, her voice thick with remorse. "I'm so sorry. So very sorry." Sunny stirred, opening her bright green eyes. She looked towards the sound, towards the shape beyond the glass. She didn't hiss, didn't shrink back. She just blinked, slowly, then settled back into her blankets. Mrs. Gable wept silently for a long moment. Will she be all right? Truly. The vet is hopeful, Sarah said, but she'll need a special home. Patient, understanding her limitations. Mrs. Gable nodded, wiping her eyes with a crumpled tissue. Not now. Not after what I did. I'm going to my daughter's. For a while. You to get help. She looked at Sarah, her eyes filled with a desperate plea. But, could you? You saved her. You have that kind cat, the quiet one? He knew, didn't he? He knew he was there, suffering. Sarah hadn't mentioned Odin's role. The question hit her with unexpected force. He knew. Odin, she said softly. His name is Odin. And yes, he knew. Mrs. Gable managed a watery, fragile smile. A good name. Wise. She reached into her worn purse, pulling out a small envelope. It's not much, but for her care. Please. She pressed it into Sarah's hand. It felt thin, but the gesture was heavy with meaning. Thank you, Sarah. For her, and for not hating me. Sarah watched her leave, a small, broken figure shuffling out of the clinic. The envelope contained a modest sum, likely a significant sacrifice. The anger was gone, replaced by a complex sadness and a dawning sense of purpose. Bringing Sunny home was another kind of leap. The vet was cautiously optimistic. The amputation site was healing well. Her eyes were clear. She was eating soft food ravenously, a tiny engine fueled by pure survival instinct. But she was still fragile, still scared, still learning to navigate the world on 3 legs. Sarah transformed a corner of her living room into a safe haven for Sunny. Low-sided box, soft blankets, food and water easily accessible, away from potential hazards. Odin watched the preparations with intense interest. He didn't approach the new space, but he didn't retreat either. He sat a few feet away, head tilted, ears pricked, taking it all in. His usual profound calm seemed layered with a new, watchful curiosity. When Sarah brought Sunny home in the carrier, setting it carefully in her designated corner, Odin remained still. He sniffed the air, processing the new scent, the scent of the clinic, the trauma, the resilience. Sunny, huddled in the back of the carrier, peered out with wide, frightened green eyes. She hissed a tiny, raspy sound, puffing up her orange fur to look bigger. Odin didn't react to the hiss. He didn't flinch. He simply sat, utterly still, utterly present. He turned his head slowly, his clouded blue eyes seeming to gaze, not directly at Sunny, but towards her space, towards her fear. Sarah held her breath. This was the moment. Would Odin, who valued quiet and order and predictable pathways, accept this tiny, traumatized whirlwind? This creature whose entry into their lives had shattered their fragile peace? Sunny ventured a shaky step out of the carrier. She wobbled and used to her new center of gravity, her missing leg a phantom sensation. She stumbled, letting out a small, startled meep. Instantly, Odin moved. Not towards her, not away. He stood, turned deliberately, and walked a few slow, precise steps. He positioned himself, sitting squarely between Sunny and the low coffee table, its sharp corner a potential hazard for a wobbly kitten. He faced away from Sunny towards the room. But his posture, his stillness, was a clear, silent statement. This way is clear. This space is safe. Sunny froze, watching the large gray cat. She hissed again, weakly. Odin didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the sound. He simply remained, a silent sentinel, a living landmark in her disorienting new world. Minutes passed. Sunny's fur slowly smoothed down. Her wide eyes darted from Odin's still form to the open space, to her food bowl nearby. Hunger overcoming fear, she took another wobbly step. Then another. She navigated carefully around Odin, giving him a wide berth, her gaze fixed on him with wary fascination. She reached her food bowl and began to eat, ravenously, but with one eye still on the gray sentinel. Odin didn't move. He didn't look at her. He just sat, guarding the corner, holding the space safe. His purr started, that deep, resonant thrum, a low vibration of calm that seemed to seep into the very air of the room. Sarah watched, tears welling again, but this time, they were tears of profound wonder. Odin wasn't just tolerating the intruder. He was guiding her. Without sight, without sound, he was offering the one thing he possessed in abundance: spatial certainty, safety. He was becoming her anchor, just as he had become Sarah's. Life moved forward, but irrevocably changed. The empty silence Sarah once dreaded was now filled with the tiny, determined thump scuffle of three-legged movement, the occasional wobbly tumble, and Sunny's surprisingly loud, demanding meows when she was hungry. Odin's quiet routines adapted. He still mapped his paths, but now he often paused, head tilted, listening to Sunny's explorations. He seemed to anticipate her wobbles, positioning himself near potential hazards, a living buffer against the world's sharp edges. Sunny, slow, lost her fear of the big gray cat. She started following him, mimicking his paths, her gait unsteady but determined. She'd bump into him sometimes, a soft thump against his side. Odin would simply step aside or adjust his position, never reacting with annoyance. He'd let out a soft a sound that seemed almost patient. Sarah watched this slow, tentative dance of trust unfold. She saw how Sunny learned the layout of the apartment faster by following Odin's confident routes. How she'd pause when he paused, sensing a potential obstacle he detected with whiskers or hearing. Odin never led her. He simply existed in the space, and his existence, his predictable movements, created a map Sunny could follow. A guide not by sight, but by silent, unwavering presence. The grief for Mr. Whiskers was still there, a quiet ache. But it no longer filled the apartment. It shared space now with Sunny's fiery spirit, her clumsy bravery, her loud demands for cuddles once she discovered Sarah's lap. And it shared space with the profound, silent language between the gray cat and the orange tripod. Odin, who had navigated his own profound darkness, was now a beacon for another lost soul. Sarah sat on the sofa one evening, Sunny purring like a tiny, rusty engine on her lap, one front paw kneading rhythmically against her thigh. Odin sat nearby, on his heated bed beneath the window, bathed in the fading afternoon light. He wasn't sleeping. His head was turned, his clouded eyes seeming to gaze toward Sunny and Sarah. His deep purr blended with Sunny's higher one, a harmonious vibration in the quiet room. Sarah looked from the tiny orange survivor to the quiet gray sentinel. She thought of the blind kitten deemed unadoptable, sitting stoically in his sterile cage. She thought of the empty carrier, the crushing silence. She thought of the shared wall, the desperate mule, the antiseptic smell, the feel of feverish fur. She thought of Mrs. Gable's shattered face, the envelope, the whispered apology. Life hadn't gotten simpler. Vet bills loomed. Sunny needed ongoing care, patience, adaptation. Odin's needs remained, his quiet world requiring consistency. Sarah's own heart still bore its scars. But the map, the one she and Odin had started charting together, had expanded. It now included wobbly paths, phantom limbs, fierce green eyes, and the silent, profound mentorship of a blind cat who saw more deeply than anyone knew. The apartment wasn't silent anymore. It hummed with life, complex, messy, resilient. Odin's quiet strength, once a lifeline for Sarah, was now a guiding light for Sunny. The blind kitten no one wanted had become the most essential compass in their little, imperfect world. The choice to bring him home, the choice to listen to his silent plea, had led them here. To this moment. To this fragile, beautiful, three-legged harmony. The journey wasn't over, but they were navigating it together, one deliberate step, one soft, one resonant purr at a time. The quiet shift in Sarah's heart, that first spark ignited by a paw on glass, had become a steady flame illuminating a path she never could have walked alone. Life settled into a new, lopsided rhythm. The apartment, once a quiet shrine to memory, then a cautious sanctuary for one blind cat, now thrummed with the insistent energy of recovery and adaptation. Sunny's presence was a constant, vibrant counterpoint to Odin's profound stillness. Her three-legged gait, a determined thump-scuffle-thump, became the soundtrack to their days. She explored with a reckless bravery that often ended in a wobbly tumble or a surprised mewp, followed by frantic scrambling to right herself. Odin, ever the silent sentinel, seemed to anticipate these stumbles. He'd often be found sitting near the edge of the sofa or beside a table leg, not interfering, just present. A soft, gray landmark in her chaotic world. Sunny's fear of him dissolved, replaced by a fascination that bordered on worship. She shadowed him relentlessly. Where Odin walked with silent, deliberate precision, Sunny would follow, her movements jerky, uneven, yet fiercely determined. She learned the apartment layout not by trial and error, but by mimicking Odin's routes. If he paused, whiskers twitching near a chair leg, Sunny would pause too, sniffing the air cautiously before navigating around it. If he took a precise right-angle turn to avoid the bookshelf, Sunny, wobbling slightly, would attempt the same maneuver. Odin never acknowledged her mimicry overtly. He simply existed. His path was her map. His stillness, her compass. Sarah watched this silent mentorship unfold with a sense of awe that never dulled. One crisp January morning, sunlight streamed through the window, painting warm rectangles on the rug. Odin was sitting in his favorite sunbeam, a picture of serene contentment, his clouded eyes half closed, deep purr resonating like a tiny engine. Sunny, energized by the light, decided the dangling edge of the rug was prey. She crouched, her lone hind leg tensed, tail twitching, then launched herself in a lopsided pounce. She missed the rug fringe entirely, tumbling sideways with a surprised yelp, landing near Odin's tail. Odin didn't startle. He didn't move. He simply stopped purring for a beat, opened his eyes fully, turned his head a fraction, and seemed to listen to the disgruntled kitten scrambling beside him. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered his head. Not to sniff her, not to lick. He gently, oh so gently, nudged the top of Sunny's head with his nose. A soft, guiding pressure. Sunny, momentarily stunned, froze. Then, understanding flickered in her bright green eyes. She pushed against Odin's nose, using the gentle pressure as leverage to heave herself upright. Once standing, she shook herself vigorously, sending orange fur flying, then immediately rubbed her entire body against Odin's side, purring like a tiny buzzsaw. Odin endured the affectionate assault with stoic patience. After a moment, he resumed his purring, a deeper, richer sound now, and carefully shifted his weight, creating a warm hollow of space beside him in the sunbeam. Sunny, without hesitation, squeezed herself into it, curling her small body against his larger, softer one. Within minutes, both were asleep, a tangle of gray and orange fur, rising and falling in the shared rhythm of breath and purr. Sarah, watching from the kitchen doorway, felt her throat tighten. It was a small gesture, insignificant, perhaps, to an outside observer. But to Sarah, who knew the depth of Odin's silent world, the profound trust Sunny placed in his guidance, and the quiet acceptance Odin offered in return, it was everything. It was the final, undeniable proof of the invisible bridge Odin had built, not just between himself and Sunny, but within Sarah's own heart. Later that week, Sarah found herself pulling out the old photo album again. The one filled with Mr. Whiskers. She hadn't opened it since that tearful evening months ago, with Odin offering silent comfort. This time, it felt different. She sat on the sofa, the album open on her lap. Sunny, sensing her stillness, immediately abandoned her attempt to scale the curtains and wobbled over, demanding lap access. Sarah lifted her up, settling the warm, purring bundle against her chest. Odin, who had been mapping the perimeter of the room, paused near the sofa. He tilted his head, listening to Sunny's purr, then gracefully hopped up beside Sarah. Not on her lap, but close, his side pressed against her thigh, a solid, warm presence. Sarah flipped through the pages. Mr. Whiskers as a tiny, fluffy handful, sprawled belly up in a sunbeam, curled around Sarah's neck while she studied, dignified and wise in his later years. The familiar ache was there, a bittersweet pang. But it was no longer a raw wound. It was a cherished scar. She traced a picture of him batting at a feather toy, his eyes alight with mischief. "He'd have liked you both, you know," she murmured, more to the pictures than to the cats. "He was grumpy sometimes, but he had a big heart. Under all that fur." Sunny kneaded her paws against Sarah's sweater, purring louder. Odin rested his chin on his paws, his clouded eyes seeming to gaze towards the album, though Sarah knew he couldn't see it. She turned a page, and there it was. A picture she'd forgotten. Mr. Whiskers, maybe a year old, sitting on the windowsill of her old apartment. It was snowing heavily outside. He wasn't looking out at the snow. He was looking back over his shoulder, directly at the camera, at Sarah. His expression wasn't playful or aloof. It was attentive, deeply focused, almost protective. It was the same expression she'd seen on Odin's face countless times, when he listened intently to a sound only he could hear, when he sensed her sadness, when he stood guard while Sunny explored. Sarah stared at the photograph. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. She'd been sick, terribly sick with the flu, alone in that old apartment. Feverish, shivering, unable to get out of bed for water. Mr. Whiskers, who usually preferred his independence, had stayed glued to her side. Not just sleeping near her, but pressed against her, his purr a constant, low vibration against her ribs. He'd nudged her hand with his head when she moaned. He'd even batted weakly at the empty water glass on the nightstand, as if trying to tell her something. She dismissed it then, too delirious to understand. But looking at that photo now, seeing that focused, protective gaze, she understood. He had been trying to tell her, trying to care for her in the only way he knew how. A soft gasp escaped her. She looked down at Odin, resting peacefully beside her. She looked at Sunny, a warm, purring weight on her chest, her missing leg tucked beneath her. The parallels weren't lost on her. Mr. Whiskers, sensing her illness, offering silent, purring comfort. Odin, sensing suffering through a wall, guiding her to Sunny. Odin now, offering his silent strength and spatial certainty to guide the tiny survivor. It was a lineage of care. A chain of quiet, profound empathy passed between creatures who spoke different languages, navigated different worlds, yet understood the fundamental language of presence. The gift wasn't just Sunny's survival. It wasn't just Odin's guidance. It was this revelation. The understanding that her bond with Mr. Whiskers hadn't ended, it had evolved. His quiet, protective spirit lived on. It lived in Odin's profound stillness, his ability to perceive the unseen currents of emotion and need. It lived in the way Odin, without sight, had become a beacon for Sunny, teaching her to navigate her altered world not through pity, but through the simple, unwavering certainty of his existence. And it lived in Sunny's fierce, joyful resilience, a testament to the care she'd received, first from Sarah's intervention, and now from Odin's silent mentorship. Sarah closed the album gently. The ache for Mr. Whiskers was still there, a familiar hollow, but it was filled now with a profound sense of connection. Not replacement, but continuation. She placed a hand on Odin's back, feeling the deep thrum of his purr vibrate through her palm. She stroked Sunny's soft orange head, feeling the tiny kitten sigh and burrow deeper. The apartment was alive with sound, Sunny's purr, Odin's purr, the soft thump scuffle of three-legged exploration, the distant city hum. It wasn't the silence she'd once feared. It was a symphony of survival, trust, and quiet, extraordinary love. The final piece of the gift revealed itself not in a grand gesture, but in a quiet moment of reflection. Sarah realized Odin hadn't just helped Sunny adapt to her missing leg. He'd helped Sarah adapt. He'd shown her that loss wasn't an ending, but a reshaping. That darkness, whether literal or emotional, could be navigated. That strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it was the quiet certainty of a purr in the dark, the deliberate placement of a paw, the unwavering presence beside you when you stumble. Odin, the blind kitten deemed unadoptable, had become more than a pet, more than a companion. He had become a living testament to the unseen connections that bind us, the profound language of silent understanding, and the unexpected ways love finds its path, even through the deepest darkness. He hadn't just guided Sunny, he had guided Sarah back to herself, revealing a resilience and capacity for love she hadn't known she still possessed. The gift wasn't the cats. The gift was the map Odin had silently drawn, a map of the heart, proving that even the most broken paths can lead you home. The seasons turned, painting the world outside Sarah's window in the vibrant greens of spring, then the hazy gold of summer. Inside, the symphony of their shared life deepened, each note richer, more complex. Sunny's thump scuffle evolved from a hesitant stumble into a confident, rhythmic cadence, a unique three-legged gait that spoke of pure, unadulterated determination. She no longer just navigated the apartment, she conquered it. Bookshelves were scaled, with strategic pauses, sofa backs became precarious perches, and the top of the refrigerator was declared sovereign territory after a particularly daring, wobbly leap that left Sarah's heart in her throat. Odin remained her constant, silent North Star. He didn't lead, he simply was. His predictable routes, his pauses near potential obstacles, his profound stillness in sunbeams, these were the landmarks Sunny relied on, the map she internalized. Their bond was a language beyond sight or sound. A brush of fur as Sunny passed, Odin's tail curling gently around her for balance when she wobbled precariously, the way Sunny would seek out his warmth for naps, tucking her small orange body against his soft gray side, their purrs harmonizing into a low, comforting drone. Sarah watched them, often pausing in her daily tasks, a cup of tea cooling forgotten in her hand. The raw grief that had once felt like a physical weight had softened, transformed. It wasn't gone, it was woven into the fabric of her present, a bittersweet thread adding depth to the vibrant tapestry of now. She saw Mr. Whiskers in the slant of afternoon light on the rug, heard his phantom purr in the quiet moments before sleep. But now, those memories brought a smile more often than tears. They were part of the lineage Odin had revealed, a lineage of quiet care, of presence offered in darkness. One crisp autumn afternoon, sunlight streamed through the window, painting long, golden rectangles on the floor. Odin sat regally in his customary sunbeam, a picture of serene contentment, his clouded eyes half closed, his deep purr a steady vibration in the warm air. Sunny, a streak of orange fire, was engaged in her favorite game, Ambush the Dust Bunny. She crouched behind the leg of an armchair, her lone hind leg tensed, her bright green eyes fixed on an unsuspecting fluff drifting lazily across the floorboards. Sarah, sitting on the sofa with a book, watched the familiar scene unfold. Sunny launched. Her movement was powerful, surprisingly coordinated, but the physics of 3 legs meant her trajectory was slightly off. Instead of landing squarely on the dust bunny, she overshot, skidding slightly on the smooth wood, her momentum carrying her straight towards the low coffee table. Sarah instinctively tensed, ready to lunge, but stopped. Odin moved. Not with panic, but with fluid, silent precision. He didn't stand, he simply shifted his weight, unfolding from his sunbeam repose in one smooth motion. He took 2 deliberate steps, placing his body directly in Sunny's wobbling path. Not blocking her aggressively, but presenting a soft, warm barrier. Sunny thumped gently into his side, her forward momentum absorbed by his solid, purring presence. She let out a surprised little mew, then instantly began rubbing her head against him, purring loudly, the near collision forgotten in favor of affection. Odin lowered his head, gently nudging her ear with his nose, a silent all clear. Then he calmly stepped aside, allowing Sunny to refocus on her dust bunny prey, which had drifted safely out of harm's way. He resumed his place in the sunbeam, his purr deepening, a low rumble of satisfaction. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It wasn't the first time Odin had intervened, a silent guardian angel anticipating Sunny's unsteady moments. But each time, it struck her anew. This blind cat, deemed unadoptable, written off by the world as too difficult, too broken, possessed a depth of perception, a capacity for care that was breathtaking. He navigated Sunny's world not out of obligation, but with a quiet, profound understanding. He saw her needs, the need for spatial guidance, for soft landings, for reassurance, with a clarity that transcended vision. She looked around her apartment. It was filled with the evidence of their journey. Sunny's favorite toys scattered like colorful confetti. Odin's heated bed beneath the window. The clear pathways maintained for his mapping. The framed photo of Mr. Whiskers on the shelf, no longer a source of piercing pain, but a warm reminder of love's enduring thread. The modest check from Mrs. Gable, tucked away, a symbol of remorse and connection. And the 2 cats themselves, the gray sentinel and the fiery tripod, a living testament to resilience, adaptation, and the extraordinary power of silent empathy. The meaning wasn't shouted, it whispered. It was in the quiet thrum of Odin's purr as Sunny slept against him. It was in Sunny's fierce, joyful leap onto the windowsill, mastering her world on her own terms. It was in Sarah's own heart, no longer echoing with emptiness, but filled with a complex, vibrant love. This story wasn't just about a blind cat or a rescued kitten. It was about the unseen maps we all navigate. It was about the potential hidden within what the world labels broken. Odin wasn't broken. He was differently abled, possessing senses and depths of understanding sight couldn't fathom. Sunny, missing a leg, wasn't diminished. Her spirit burned brighter, fiercer. It was about the profound language of presence. Odin spoke volumes without a sound. His strength wasn't in dominance, but in unwavering stillness, in the quiet certainty of his being. He taught Sunny and Sarah that sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer is simply being there, a safe harbor, a silent guide, a warm body to bump into when you lose your way. It was about listening with more than your ears. Odin heard the silent cry of suffering through a wall. Sarah learned to listen to his silent pleas, to the subtle shifts in his energy that spoke volumes. It was a reminder that the deepest truths, the most urgent needs, are often communicated in whispers, in stillness, in the spaces between words. It was about grief not being an end, but a transformation. The loss of Mr. Whiskers carved a hollow in Sarah's world, but that hollow became a space where new love, new understanding, could take root and bloom in unexpected ways. Love didn't replace, It expanded, evolved, finding new forms and connections. It was about unexpected families and quiet mentorship. Their trio wasn't conventional. A grieving woman, a blind cat, a three-legged kitten. Yet, they forged a family bound by shared vulnerability, silent understanding, and fierce, protective love. Odin, the quietest of them all, became the unspoken mentor, guiding both Sunny and Sarah through their respective darknesses with infinite patience and grace. Sarah closed her book, setting it aside. She walked over to the sunbeam, sinking down onto the warm floorboards beside her cats. Odin turned his head fractionally towards her, his purr deepening. Sunny, momentarily abandoning her dust bunny, wobbled over and climbed into her lap, turning circles before settling with a contented sigh. Sarah rested one hand on Odin's soft back, feeling the powerful vibration of his purr. With the other, she stroked Sunny's silken orange fur. The afternoon light gilded their fur, casting long, peaceful shadows. The city hummed distantly outside, a gentle counterpoint to the intimate symphony within. Odin's resonant purr, Sunny's softer buzz, the rhythm of their breathing. Sarah looked from Odin's serene, sightless face to Sunny's bright, watchful eyes, then out the window at the golden autumn world. The message settled over her, warm and clear as the sunlight. The world is full of darkness, seen and unseen. We all navigate missing pieces, broken paths, moments of profound disorientation. But we are not meant to walk these paths alone. Sometimes, the guide we need arrives in the most unexpected form, a quiet presence in a shelter cage, a sigh through a wall, a nudge in the right direction. Look beyond the obvious. Listen to the silences. See with your heart. There is extraordinary strength in vulnerability, profound wisdom in stillness, and maps to be found in the most unlikely places. Love, in its purest form, is often a silent promise whispered not in words, but in presence, in patience, in the unwavering decision to stand beside another soul as they learn to walk their unique, imperfect path. Odin shifted, resting his chin on Sarah's knee. Sunny stretched, her tiny paw batting gently at a sunbeam. The silence in the apartment wasn't empty anymore. It was full of trust earned, challenges overcome, love quietly thriving against all odds. It was the sound of home, rebuilt not on perfection, but on acceptance, resilience, and the quiet, extraordinary guidance of a blind cat who taught them all how to truly see. If this story of Odin, Sunny, and Sarah found a place in your heart, then your support means the world. Smash that like button. Let us know these quiet journeys of resilience resonate with you. Subscribe to the channel, tap that bell icon so you never miss our daily stories of hope, healing, and the extraordinary bonds that light up our world. Share this video, pass the warmth along. Someone out there might need this reminder of unseen strength today. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? And whose quiet presence has been your guiding light? Because sometimes, the most profound stories are whispered, not shouted. We'll see you tomorrow for another moment of light. Keep believing in the unseen maps.